Hello and welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. Today we have the honor of hosting Professor Bensaou, Professor of Technology Management and Asian Business and Comparative Management at INSEAD, Fontainebleau, France. Professor Bensaou is the author of the insightful book Built to Innovate: Essential Practices to Wire Innovation into Your Company's DNA. In this episode, Professor Bensaou will explore the core principles of his book and share his expertise on how to build innovative organizations. So get ready for an engaging discussion filled with valuable insights on embedding innovations into your company's DNA. Professor Ben, it's a true delight to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Deepak. I'm very pleased and thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Professor Ben, could you start by giving us a brief overview of your book, Built to Innovate, and what inspired you to write it?
All right. So in this book, in the end, what I do is introduce the audience to a whole different narrative about innovation, a different way to think about innovation. And I fundamentally try to help organizations and leaders to hardwire innovation into a company's DNA. Actually, I say a company, but it can also apply to a public service company, organization as well. So now, why did I write this book? So, I mean, people might certainly have seen the bio, but I've all in all, I would say, okay. Actually, first I should say that I'm a professor at INSEAD, and you mentioned I'm in technology management, but also in Asian business and comparative management. And all in all, I would say that I spent over 20 years doing research, teaching, and consulting on innovation. And during the way, I studied close to 100 organizations. When I say studied, close 100 organizations around the world, in the public sector, in the private sector, in many different industries. I studied startups in the Silicon Valley, small and medium-sized enterprises, all the way to large industrial conglomerates like those that exist in Japan, Korea, and I studied also some in Turkey. And what is interesting is that I came across some fascinating organizations, some companies that actually managed to proactively transform themselves into innovation powerhouses. And the big surprise to me was that many of these were old, established companies operating in very traditional businesses. And basically, this is the reason why I wanted to write the book. I wanted to tell their stories. I wanted to document some of the key insights. And of course, as an academic, I wanted to codify what I had learned in the form of new concepts, new frameworks, and as a matter of fact, I've developed over the years a toolkit that can be shared with a wider audience. So this is how the book came about, if you will.
Very insightful. Thank you, Professor. Professor Ben, what are the core practices that companies need to adopt to embed innovation into their DNA? Can you share some examples of organizations that have successfully done this?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good, nice way to start the conversation. I think it's good to anchor the conversation with a couple examples. I mean, to give you a sense of what companies we're talking about, huh? So let me give you just a couple, and then I will add other examples as we go deeper in the conversation. So let me start with Starwood. Maybe people are familiar with Starwood, the global hospitality company. A few years ago, Starwood organized a global conference in Paris, near INSEAD, for 700 of their frontline hotel managers. So we first kind of introduced them to a few basic concepts and tools on innovation. And then what we did, we split the 700 participants into 64 teams. We gave them metro tickets. We gave them cameras and notepads. And then we sent them into the streets of Paris to simply, take pictures, try to capture experiences and stories about, ordinary travelers. And what was really fascinating is that 3 hours later, they came back with some remarkable insights and stories. They had generated 1,700 new ideas. Now, just to be clear, many of these were small improvements to some existing process or service, but a few became the foundation to some global initiative. Like I like to mention this new marketing program they called Fantastic. It's a program to create special packages for families, but these packages are based on research done on what kids, not adults, what kids expect from a great hotel experience. Now, I mean, to be sure, none of these 700 people were a specialist in innovation. However, each one of them realized that by simply stepping away from their daily routine and immersing themselves in the world of their customers, it suddenly opened floodgates of fresh ideas. And I'll come back to this example if needed. The second example I can share with you is about Fiskars. Fiskars is a 400-year-old manufacturing company based in Finland. They're best known for their iconic orange scissors. People usually know about them. So they manufacture cutting tools, tableware, outdoor equipment for gardening and other purposes. And Fiskars, for me, is a very good example of an old, established company that was able to enter an entirely new industry. And their approach to innovation is methodical, continuous, and systematic. So just as an example, to better understand, I mean, I'm sure your audience is familiar with the concept of the job to be done. To better understand the job to be done of their customers, they conducted an in-depth ethnographic exploration of their gardening customers. So they they looked at what happens before, during, and after home gardeners use Fiskars tools. And through this research, they made a significant discovery. They understood that watering was an essential task for home gardeners. It's an integral part of the experience of their gardening customers. And at the same time, they realized that they themselves had the technology, they had the design capabilities and the technologies that would allow them to develop a very differentiated, highly differentiated watering solution for their customers, a solution that none of the existing players could think of. And fundamentally, instead of opting for the conventional rack-mounted device that people, where people store their hose, they develop all-in-one standalone device. I think they called it the water wheel. And the water wheel is, as I said, a standalone device with fitted with wheels. It has 360 degrees range of motion. It's fitted with all sorts of accessories, so you can irrigate a plot for a long time, or you can set up a play area for the kids. Now, the water wheel mind you, Fiskars was not in the hose business. So but the water wheel won many design awards, and it became a very profitable addition to the Fiskars product lineup. And this is just, I'm mentioning this example, but I saw other examples at Fiskars of this continuous and systematic approach to innovation. And that has established them as a very innovative and successful company. So I just wanted to kind of highlight these two examples to kind of answer your question. So if you're an established organization, so here I want to emphasize, I'm not talking about high-tech companies like Amazon and Tesla and Apple. I'm not talking about Marvel or Netflix. I'm talking about established companies. So how do we become more innovative like these companies? And because again, how would I call it? Genius-led innovation or disruptive innovation, it's very hard. Not every company can be, a Tesla or Amazon or Facebook. I think we all get it. And this is the reason why, after I observed the companies that I mentioned, I decided to introduce a different narrative about innovation. So you saw here with the examples I gave you, I tried to already address a few myths about innovation. So the first myth is that innovation is all about some superhero, some we like to call them genius. But with Starwood, for instance, we can see that this is not true. Anybody can innovate. Innovation is not about a special talent. You could see the frontline managers at Starwood were able to come up with like significant innovation. So first principle in my new narrative is, in a sense, is that anybody can innovate. The second myth is that innovation is all about big bang and breakthroughs and disruption. And then again, we saw with the story of Fiskars, I just gave you two examples, but and I have many others in the book, but we saw with Fiskars that big bang is not the only type of innovation. Fiskars was able to enter a new industry and be extremely successful at it, adopting an approach to innovation that was very continuous and systematic. The third myth that I see very often about innovation is that innovation is all about senior leaders or some specialists, a few specialists within the organization in R&D, for instance, or in new product development. But then again, this is not necessarily true all the time. Innovation can be driven by the whole organization. And we just saw a couple examples with Fiskars and Starwood, where the heroes of innovation are the ones at the front line. So let me add a couple more, let's say, principles in my new narrative on innovation. So first was anybody can innovate. Innovation can be continuous and systematic, and the whole organization can contribute to innovation. The fourth part is that a lot of people think that in innovative companies, innovations come from inside out. But that's not true. In these organizations, it also comes outside in, from customers. It is all about an obsession and trying to get a deep understanding of customers, try to uncover their needs and address them. Actually, I like to think about the customers, but also some category that we call the non-customers. And then just to finalize, the fifth part of this new kind of narrative on innovation is that innovation is not only about startups and sexy high-tech companies. Any company, in fact, any organization can innovate. And actually in the book, I mentioned a few public services and government agencies. So any company can innovate. So this is really the principles that are underlying this new narrative. And if you will, we can start to get into a bit of conversation about what do these companies that I'm talking about have in common. But I'll let you, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ben. It's very insightful. Professor Ben, how crucial is leadership in fostering a culture of continuous innovation? And what specific actions can leaders take to drive this transformation?
All right, so here I almost feel like kind of not necessarily contradicting you, but kind of making a bit more kind of let's say precise argument. What I found in my research is that as I mentioned, number one, anybody can innovate. Anybody has the capability to innovate. As a matter of fact, I would almost kind of push the argument that those who are more likely to have interesting ideas for innovation are those at the front line, people who are facing customers and non-customers on a daily basis. And there's always this kind of assumption that innovation has to come from senior leaders or from so what I found in the research is that anyone in the organization can contribute to innovation. I like to say that innovation is everybody's business. Now, what I found is that frontline employees, workers, middle managers, and senior leaders all have a role to play and a contribution to make to innovation. And I think this was something that was really surprising to me. And I can come back. I think the one that most surprised me was the role of middle managers. But in a sense, if we try to focus first on leaders, well, maybe what I can do to kind of build a framework around this answer to explain how senior leaders, middle managers, and frontline employees have a role to play in building innovation capabilities. Let me kind of lay out a couple conceptual points.
Sure, Professor.
Actually, just before that, so that the audience has a sense of what are we talking about.
Yes.
I like to make a distinction between two words. I like to make a distinction between the word innovation as a noun and the verb to innovate, or I like to talk about innovating. I mean, people will probably notice that the book title does not have innovation in the title. It has the verb to innovate. Now, where is this coming from? Again, this is serendipity, total accident. What I noticed when I talk to people around the world about innovation, what I noticed after a while is that the word innovation is very intimidating, especially for people at the front line. And I noticed also that many of the executives who come to an innovation training program at INSEAD, they tend to believe that their boss expects them to come up with a breakthrough product or discover a new market space after the program. And I feel it in the classroom. There's a pressure, and they hate it. So after a while, I decided to simply avoid using the word innovation. Instead, I refer to innovating, or I use the word to innovate. And then something curious happens. The sense of tension in the classroom kind of dissipates. And the reason, I think, is that innovating as a verb does not imply any specific outcome or result. Instead, it refers to a process, a behavior, a set of behaviors that anybody can learn and practice. So for me, if you will, innovating is simply about looking for new ideas, developing them, testing them, with no guarantee as to what you're going to find. And this approach, I find, gives anybody in the room the permission to try their hand at looking for new ideas. Because after all, we know that very few of us are geniuses capable of producing insightful kind of ideas on command, right? But engaging in some sort of activity, and you can see that innovating as a process, it can be taught, it can be guided, by tools and techniques and structured processes. So if it can help the audience, I mean, I like to use the metaphor of the iceberg, where if innovation is the tip of the iceberg, the impressive peak rising above the water level, then innovating represents what happens beneath the surface. It is where the collective individual capability of the organization lies, ready to be activated. So just before we get into the details of how this works, I want to make sure that what I'm talking about is not about innovation, the peak, the result, the outcome, but it is about how do you build the innovating capability of the organization? How do you build, I mean, some people refer to it as a culture. So it is about this collective capability. I like to call it the collective genius, if you will, instead of the individual genius of the founder, So how do you build that? And what I found in these organizations that I studied, like Starwood or Fiskars and many others, BSF, Bayer, I'll mention maybe about those, is that what these organizations, when you look at how they operate, I found that they don't operate with one, but two engines, similar to those of an airline, a jet. And so they have, and people are very familiar with it, they have twin engines. One is the execution engine, trying, obsessively to implement the strategy of today. And they have what I call an innovating engine, innovating, not innovation, an innovating engine, which is focused on the strategy of the future. This is where you imagine, you develop, you test ideas for products, processes, and the services of the future. So this is really what the fundamental, let's say, practical aspect of the book is really about. How do you build on top? Because I mean, every organization has a very elaborate, hopefully very important, hopefully very well functioning execution engine. And the challenge to prepare for the future is how do you tap into, leverage the capability of everyone in the organization. And what I found is that these organizations, what they have done is that they have built on top of the execution engine, they have built something, very concrete. This is something very concrete, but it is a dedicated, fully legitimized and fully protected time and space for people to engage into innovating activities. And this is what I call the innovating engine.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, my answers are long-winded,
that's
but
fine.
I
But
like to kind of put the context.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a very insightful, Professor, and very interesting, Yeah. Professor, innovation often meets resistance within established companies. So what strategies do you recommend for overcoming internal barriers to innovation?
So I've seen, this is interesting. I've seen organizations that, so we're talking about basically, your question is about how can you build a legitimate
Right.
and well-functioning, nicely humming, innovating engine. Huh? So I
Yes,
try
yes.
to use my language so that
Sure.
we share the same. So this is all about how do you build this innovating engine, and of course you have many barriers, and in essence, I've seen organizations build their innovating engine from the top down, but I've also seen organizations doing it from the bottom up. So from the top down, let's take the case of the top down. This is where, as you're alluding to it earlier, the role of senior leaders is very important. It's very important. It's very important for them to first put innovation at the center of corporate strategy. They have to create a sense of, that innovation is very important. It is, in a sense, I like to say that senior leaders are the ones who have to give permission. They have to give permission to everyone in the organization to innovate, to give everyone the sense that innovation is also part of their job. They might not be, the front line might not be incentivized or sanctioned on whether they could contribute to innovation or not. But if they do, they certainly have the permission to do it. They are encouraged to do it. And if they do, they will be recognized and will be rewarded. So it is important that senior leaders first give the permission. It is important that they participate in a process which I recognize in the innovating engine, which is what I call the reframing process. They encourage the organization to challenge the shared assumption about which business we are in, what type of companies we are in, who are our customers, what our customers want. So they have to be leaders, if you will, in this process of reframing and challenging the organization. They are the ones who need to support and sponsor people into innovating activities. So this is where it's important to provide, and I'll come back to maybe middle managers, because the real challenge is really the middle managers. But middle managers, they need to have support when their teams want to innovate. So the senior leaders, they have to really create an organization. I mean, it can be a network, it can be a community. I've seen in a top-down model, I've seen organization create an internal unit where you would have coaches, you would have trainers, and any middle manager, or for that matter, frontline person who wants to innovate, can get support from these internal consultants, these internal experts. So there would be a central unit. And maybe I'll give you an example of a company, how they build this whole structure for the innovating engine. But basically, the senior leaders, they have to put innovation at the center of corporate strategy. They have, through their communication, through their action, through their decisions, make clear that everybody has permission, is encouraged, is supported to participate on a regular basis into innovating activities. Innovating, remember, innovating and getting engaged in innovating activities in some form or another is something that is legitimate, if you will. This is very, very important. You remember the example about Starwood. It's simply about spending some time immersing yourself in the environment of your customer. Anybody can do that, any employee. And that would count as, doing your innovating part of your job. And then, of course, they have to institutionalize a unit. They have to create a language. They have to create a process by which ideas are winnowed, channeled, selected, and of course the best ones get implemented and they move to the execution engine. So this is the role of the senior leaders. Basically, they have to really make innovation at the center and create a language, create a structure, a formal structure. It's a very simple test for me when I engage with an organization and senior leaders or whoever is interested in developing further, expanding their innovating capabilities. I do a very quick and dirty audit. I interview a few people in the organization and I just ask them a simple question: where does innovation lie in your organization? Right? Either people know or they don't know. But usually when people know, they just say, oh, go to the R&D or talk to the senior leaders. So innovating, an organization that has a very well-functioning innovating engine, people at the front line should be able to know, they should know, if I wanted to get involved in innovation, where would I go? Where would I go? What could I apply to? Could I get into a training? Could I participate into a hackathon or some sort of a formal structure? So now I talked about this, the top down. Now I have to say that I've seen also bottom up. And the bottom up usually functions in a similar way, is that, and this is where the role of middle managers is very important. Some middle manager, obviously kind of forward-looking middle manager, has a team that gives permission and supports a team in developing an interesting idea. And then what happens is that this idea gets a little bit kind of some of it is successful, so gets exposure, gets kind of the spotlight. And this is where I like to call it make other people jealous. So other middle managers, they hear about this pocket there where somebody did something interesting. And this something could be, we're not talking about necessarily a technology or product. I mean, this is another thing I want to make clear, is that when I talk about innovation here, or to innovate, I mean, you can innovate in everything you do. It can be in technology, it can be a product, but it can also be in a process or a functional area. So if people hear about some pocket in the organization, a unit where they innovated the HR process, for instance, or the logistics process, this is what I call make other people jealous. Other middle managers, they would like to know, how did you do that? How did your team? Why is it that your team is so innovative? We hear, people talk. We hear about it. And then in these organizations, what I've seen when they do it well, they actually capture that and they institutionalize it. And they start to build the organization from the bottom up. So again, to answer your question, you can build it up top down, where obviously senior leaders have to, kind of lay out the roadmap and institutionalize the processes from top down, but they can also capture, what is happening in the organization and encourage it and, somewhat kind of institutionalize it after the fact.
Yeah, very, very nice. Professor, how can companies maintain a balance between sustaining innovation and managing their day-to-day operations?
Yes, this is really the key challenge, right? Because and this is why I formalize it as two engines, right? So day-to-day operations is the territory of the execution engine, right? So I said the execution engine is all about implementing today's strategy, delivering the products on time, on quality, at the right kind of cost structure. And to be able to compete in the future, you need to also prepare the strategy of the future, right? And of course, I'm not challenging the notion that it can be done by R&D, or it can be done by some individual genius within the company. But what I'm talking about is that how can you tap into and leverage the capability of everybody? So this is where you have to build this innovating engine, protect it, and make sure that it is humming properly, right? So now this is all a question of balance. And I think you raise a very important issue, because I've seen quite a few companies that believe that, oh, now we understand about innovation, and everything is about innovation. And I like to tell people that if you don't defend your existing business, you can think about and try to imagine the future. If you don't defend your business of today, you won't be there.
Correct.
You won't be there.
Yes.
So, I mean, it is clear that the essence, the first, is that you have to defend your existing business. But the argument here is to say that if we can do casual observations in our lives, is that individuals have a huge capability. I mean, I don't want to go back into neuroscience and where does creativity, the functioning of the brain and all that, but the fundamental premise here is that everybody has an innate, as you're born, you have innovating capability. The problem in many organizations is that because of the tyranny of the execution engine, what happens is that people, when they go to work, they just turn off this innovating capability. They turn it off. It's not that it does not exist, it's that they turn it off. At the moment they step into the plant or into the office. So what I'm talking about here is simply to allow anybody in the organization to express their innate capability, and if needed, because of course they have the capability, but they don't know how to do it. What I discovered is that for people to innovate, they need to feel three things. They need to, and we addressed already this, Deepak. The first thing they need is to feel that they are allowed, that they have the permission. So this is the role of senior leaders and middle managers, to tell people, yes, innovation or innovating, forgive me, innovating is part of your job. It's a legitimate part of your job, and I would expect you to, I mean, again, depending on what you do and where you are in the organization, but you are expected to do something, however small that is. However small that is, you have to do something relating to innovating activity. And the important thing here, you can notice, is to create a habit. It's not, people are not going to come up with, a breakthrough product the first time they get involved, but it's about building the muscle. It's about building the muscle. So people need to have the permission, and then when they, and you won't motivate everybody, yeah, but you will motivate a few people. And by the way, I mean, coming back to your challenge about the two engines, people who are even sometimes very good at executing and delivering, it may bring excitement and joy and different aspect to their job to sometimes get involved in something more creative. Instead of trying to sell a product to a customer, try to focus on what are the needs of this customer, or what are the things that the customer is not telling us that we can create value for them. So, and I think that will provide excitement to people. So the first thing they need is to have a sense that they have permission, even better, that they are encouraged. The second thing they need is to feel that they are capable of doing it. So people might have very creative mind, but they might not necessarily know how to do it in their job, in the business. So they need to have maybe some tools, some language, some techniques. And again, making this available to people will, awaken awaken the many people in the organization who would like to participate in this. And then the third thing that I found very important for people to engage, if you will, to bring this balance of innovating, because again, your question is very, very important, but
Yes.
the problem is not necessarily with and again, I'm trying to be careful, but it is very important to execute and to deliver. So I'm not worried about that, because I know that this is the mainstream. So the problem is, how can you give a bit more room to the innovating activity in the life of everyone in the organization? I mean, and again, people in R&D, you don't need to ask them, they do this, right? So we're talking about the mass of people who think that they're here just to deliver and to do the job they're supposed to do. So now what we want to do is to stimulate these people, to give them the permission, to give them some tools, some training, and then when they come up with ideas, even if they're not kind of fantastic, revolutionary ideas, they need to feel that they're acknowledged, that they're recognized. And I think this is how you can kind of develop, maintain, and the challenge that you were raising, you can expand the innovating engine. I think the weak link here is the innovation, is not the execution. So having said that, you remember I said you can't start to innovate if your execution engine is very weak, or is you cannot compensate, if you will. So maybe just to give, so that people don't think this is only conceptual, let me give you a quick example of one organization that people will certainly know about, that has built very concretely this innovating capability. And I have 3 or 4 examples that people will recognize, the company in the book, but let me pick up one. It's Bayer. Bayer, the global pharmaceutical and life science company based in Germany. So now we all might be very familiar with Bayer, and they have a long tradition of scientific breakthroughs through their R&D. So there's nothing to say about their R&D based innovating capability, but I found that in 2014, the board decided to build an organization, which I label the innovating engine, to tap the capabilities of the 100,000 employees within Bayer. So now what did they do? So, I mean, if people can imagine, they have this very hierarchical, execution engine. Execution engine is typically hierarchical, with silos and very structured and strict control systems. So what they did is that they overlaid on top of this execution engine, this innovating engine. So the innovating engine is a structure built on top of that, where you have a few people in the innovating engine who have a dual role. So they have a role in the execution engine, and they have another role which is part of this network. So this innovating engine has a structure, but it is more based on collaboration, delegation, and horizontal networks. So what did they do? First, they made the whole board responsible for innovation. So it's not even like, they have a chief innovation officer. The whole board is responsible for innovation. And of course, this is communicated, everybody knows. Then they selected, I mean, this is a large global organization, they selected 80 senior executives from the different regional groups, from the different global functions. And these 80 senior leaders would be supporting the board on innovation. So they called them, they had a name for them, they called them innovation ambassadors. So these ambassadors, they spend most of their time with middle managers. I might need to come back to the middle manager because this was one of the most surprising findings in the research. And so they spend time with middle managers, advocating for innovation, explaining to them why innovation is important, maybe sometimes giving them some training, supporting projects. And then what Bayer did is that they trained and certified close to 1,000 innovation coaches who were then activated across the whole organization. Which means that any middle manager who is approached by an individual or a group of people who have an idea they want to work on and try to innovate it, they don't have to feel responsible that they have to supervise the team. They just call upon the coaches who would then help the team, train them and provide them with processes and tools and guide them through the whole process until their idea is put through some competitive framework. And then Bayer, they created something called WeSolve. WeSolve is a digital platform where anybody within the company can post a problem or a challenge they're dealing with. And they are inviting ideas and suggestions from anyone across the whole organization around the world. Now, when they shared with me some of the statistics when I was doing the research then, they told me that they had 40,000 people who had engaged on WeSolve. And that was already quite a number in my mind, and also for them it was quite surprising. But the most interesting statistic they shared with me, they found that two-thirds of the best ideas came from a business division or function that was different from where the problem was posted in the first place. I mean, this is amazing. You can see how they were effectively tapping the innovating capability across the whole organization. So, but what I want to highlight with this example is to really show how this was, not relying on the R&D. So this is leveraging innovating capability of the whole organization, and that it was formally structured. Anybody would know where to go. I mean, I'm going fast, but they had at each kind of local level, people knew who was the innovation local coordinator. So if people had an idea, they didn't submit it to their boss, they submitted to a local coordinator who would then kind of, funnel it to a committee. And then, so people who had an idea, they could get the support immediately from a coach. They would have a clear procedure process by which the idea is challenged and channeled and then tested. And people knew, where to go. So this is just to kind of make it concrete, that it's not simply conceptual.
Yeah. Professor Ben, how can companies ensure that their innovation efforts are not just short-term projects, but part of a long-term vision? And what practices can help sustain innovation over the years?
Yes. All right. So let me start with the first one, and if I forget about the second one, because I kind of bring all sorts of ideas here. So the first one is short-term versus long-term, huh? And I think this is a very interesting question. And I remember the CEO of Fiskars at the time when we worked together, and they built a very interesting kind of innovating engine. And the fear for him was that people would think that having this permission, encouragement to get involved in innovation would allow people to come up with all sorts of, crazy ideas. And basically he rightfully he understood that that's not what it is. It's not about that. And this is where the role of senior leaders is very important. And actually I have a name for it. I call it the reframing process. So I mean, just very briefly, the innovating engine is defined and functions with three underlying processes, which are very different from those of the execution engine, right? So the three defining processes of the innovating engine are the creation process, obviously, right? This is the process by which you create new ideas, on a continuous and systematic basis. The second process is to connect those ideas, connect the ideas, the innovators, the resources. So this is a connecting kind of fabric. And then the third process, which I uncovered, I called it the reframing process, because this is the process by which the organization can challenge itself. This is where you can, question, the shared belief of who you are and what business you are in. I mean, you can imagine Fiskars, when they start to discuss, watering. Are we in the hose business? Well, no, we're in the cutting tools business. So this is where senior leaders are very much involved in this, what I call the reframing process, which means to not only put innovation at the center, but also to give the organization a sense of mission and purpose. And to stimulate innovation, sometimes senior leaders have to reframe the organization, give a sense of a broader mission, or redirect the purpose of the organization. Because by broadening or opening up the purpose and the mission of the organization, they are giving permission to the organization to look for new ideas within this new frame, not outside of this frame. So this is, in a sense, the short-term ideas, as long as they fit into this reframed purpose and mission, they're okay. We're not trying to, I mean, actually, let me give you an example. There's a Turkish company that I spent quite a bit of time with, and the company's name is Kordsa, and they manufacture fabric used to reinforce tires. So the tires have the valve, then they have this fabric, and then they have the rubber. So they were manufacturing the fabric that reinforces the tire. And the CEO, I mean, I don't go through the details of how he got there, but at some point, he completely changed the mission of the company. From being a company that manufactures fabric to reinforce tires to become a solution provider to any industry that needed reinforcing material. So he changed the logo of the company. He called the company the Reinforcer, which means that now the company, the frame and the mission of the company was to become the Reinforcer. And suddenly it opened the gates to anybody in the company to come back and say, we can provide a reinforcing solution to, and they entered the construction company. Their customers used to be tire companies for the automobile and truck companies, right? Now they provide solutions, reinforcing solutions to the construction company, to the electronics company, they reinforce cables, and aerospace. They started to provide reinforcement, fabrics for the shuttle, composite material for the shuttle, and now they're a supplier to SpaceX. So this is what I mean by reframing. So the long-term space within which the organization has to look for new ideas is provided by the reframing of the senior leaders. And then all the short-term ideas have to fit into that. If they're beyond the frame, that's not what we encourage. This is not, does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Professor. Professor, last two questions.
Yes.
So first is, how do innovation practices differ across cultures and regions? Are there universal principles that apply globally, or do companies need to adapt their approaches?
Yes, this is a very, very fundamental question, and I've seen things operate very differently. I mean, you noticed I spent. I mean, for those people who are interested, in my companies that I looked at in depth, I have some, in I mean, of course, in Japan, in Korea, in the Middle East, in Europe, in the US, and of course the institutional framework within which organizations operate is very different, right? I mean, you have a different IP, legislation in the US. You have different educational system. The way that the industry works with the universities is very different. So they're very different regimes, and I think it's very important to think about how you build the innovating engine somewhat differently in different regions. So if you will, my kind of framework accounts for that. So it is basically providing a set of processes that have to be kind of developed and monitored within the organization. Now, in the practical way, how do you encourage people to generate new ideas might be very different. But then for me at that stage, it's more a question of how you adapt the tools and the frameworks, but the infrastructure is fundamentally the same. I mean, I don't know if I mean, I could go into the details. I don't know if and there's some. I mean, again, there are some examples in different countries. But the examples in the book, but I think it's more a question of how do you implement some of these ideas. But the general framework of saying anybody can innovate, that you can innovate in everything you do, and it's all about creating a habit, is I think is something that I've seen in all of these organizations that I looked at in different countries. Now, in some cases, people might not need the tools. It's like if I think about Asian companies that I studied, in Japan or Korea. I mean, actually, even India, we did some work there too. It's not in the book, but we did some work too, where people are, they like procedures, they like processes. If you go to some parts of Europe or the US, I mean, when you say to people, let's do some brainstorming, they understand, they really go crazy. In other countries, like, the ones I was mentioning, you need to structure that in a process. You have to guide people through a process. But basically, it's just a gimmick to kind of get people. I mean, people have the ideas. They have the ability to listen to their customers and to observe. So it's just a question of how do you, in a cultural context, encourage that. So it's not. I don't know. Your question had many layers, but for me, let me kind of make it very clear. Building an innovating capability it can be done in any culture. Okay, so that's the basic point. And the fact that frontline people in any culture, in any country, are clearly the ones who are very close to the customers and, you know, the non-customers who are also, you know, people who can provide you with new ideas. The role of middle managers is very similar in different organizations across the world. So to stimulate these people to connect people, and the connecting mechanism is very different in Asia, from Europe, from the United States, but usually middle managers are middle managers across the world. So for me, it operates in any culture. You just need to make adjustments to the institutional framework. I mean, the environment of the organizations, and also to the internal mechanisms in the organization. But again, I've seen some processes that translate in very similar manners wherever you go. I mean, to stimulate frontline to innovate, whether you are in one culture or another, it's very important to give them a sense that it is safe. It is safe. And the safety can be in one culture simply saying it. In others is to create some process where there's anonymity, where people are actually following a very structured process. They think it's structured. I mean, it is structured, but the creativity is developed over a few processes. And I didn't mention this, but in the book I have a whole chapter on a 7-step process methodology that is very structured. Each step is almost mechanical, but people don't realize that once they finish those steps, they have been very creative. In other cultures, you might, you know, just ask people and they will come up with the idea, just like they will tell you the idea. In others, you have to make them fill in some templates.
Right.
You know, they have to do something mechanical because they don't know what it means to be creative. Just make it mechanical. It's about analyzing data. Other people, they don't need to fill in the templates. They just, you know, shout it out immediately. So this is, for me, it's about the mechanics. It's not about, you know, some cultural incapability or something like that. I don't believe in that. You have creative people. You have people who, I mean, you have creative people everywhere. It's just a question of how do you stimulate them? How do you support them? How do you give them tools to be able to do it? I think this is quite universal. I don't know if I'm answering your question the way
yes,
you...
yes, absolutely,
Okay.
Professor. Yes. Professor, my last question. Looking ahead, what do you see as the next big trends in corporate innovation? Could you share some 2 or 3 key takeaways from your book?
From the book, of course, this is self-serving, but I believe that the next big thing in innovation now, as I said, I studied a few organizations, and it might have been documented before, but my emphasis here was to really focus on established companies, old, not the usual suspects of innovation, you know, the high tech and the sexy firms. So I think that one next thing is people will realize that there's an untapped capability within the organization for innovation. And when people realize that innovation is not only about disrupting, but innovation every day, they are small and big and, you know, medium-sized innovation, and that's what innovation is about. I think there's been and that's fine. I mean, I believe in the importance of disruption and geniuses, but as I said before, not every organization can have a Steve Jobs on their staff. So I think the next stage will be first organization to recognize that there's a lot of innovating capability lying there in the organization. And the challenge is, how do you tap that and how do you harness that to actually create, new products, new services, and maybe enter new industries? I think at the more global level, people will start to recognize it's there. I'm not making it up. It's already there that a lot of the innovation in the economy is actually driven by small, medium-sized enterprises, by traditional organizations. We don't pay attention to it, that's all, but it is there. We have a tendency to embrace this narrative. I like to believe that it's very kind of Anglo-Saxon, a bit kind of driven by Silicon Valley type, it's like we think that that's what innovation is about. But there are other types of innovations and there are other heroes of innovation. And I think that the future will be that. And of course, I think, just to kind of rebound on, I mentioned to you before we started that the professor who trained me when I was at MIT was on your show, Venkat Venkatraman, a few weeks ago. And I think that what Vijay and him talk about, the fusion strategy, is also a very important trend for the future. Is really that here I didn't get into the role and the importance of technology, digital technology in innovation, but I think that will be a fusion. And if I were to kind of metaphor them, is that there will be a fusion at the individual level as well, not only at the strategic and organizational level, but people, individuals, frontline, middle managers, senior leaders, they will have to create this fusion with technology as they continue to innovate. I think that is very important. The role and the importance of technology in innovation is going to be central. It will be in combination with the humans.
Professor Bensaou, thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise on your insightful book, Built to Innovate, Essential Practices to Wire Innovation into Your Company's DNA. We deeply appreciate the time you have taken and the depth of knowledge you have brought to the discussion. Thank you once again and signing off. Thank you, Professor Ben.
Deepak, thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation. It was a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye-bye now. Bye-bye.